Okay, so we taped the perimeter out, and the inside of this tape will be our cut line. And I have this little speed square here. Once you cut through two corners, it tends to be floppy. And even if you cut this side and then this side, as soon as you cut one other side, it becomes saggy. So I like to just have something, it doesn't have to be a speed square, it could be a ruler, it could be a piece of cardboard really, that I'll pry underneath the side to keep it from flopping inward. And I'm just using a metal cutting blade on the jigsaw. When you're cutting this hole, it's critical not to go too small. You can go a little bit larger, but going too small, you'll end up having to file or grind that edge down. The whole parameter is really based on the actual size of the ring that will slip inside of it. So if you're going to drift one way or another, don't drift too far inward, and you can drift out a little bit if you're worried to cheat it to one side or the other of your tape line. Okay, once you've cut out your hole, you can go ahead and pull the tape off, and then we're going to deeper that edge. Since I'm in the shop, I have a little pneumatic tool, but a file actually works best. And don't forget to get the bottom edge underneath. You might be focused on the top edge, but just make sure you run the file along the bottom edge too. Alright, so once you finish up painting your edge there with the rust preventative, this may have been redundant because we'll probably want to do it again. What we want to do is make sure that this is all very clean. So you can use isopropyl alcohol, denatured alcohol, you can use acetone as well, but you basically clean the edge 2 inches out around this perimeter. And again, I may have done this in reverse because if I clean this really well, I'll probably be wiping some of that rust proofing off that I just did, so I'll reapply that as well. So again, probably better off to clean it first, then apply the rust preventative, and you won't have to redo a step. But the idea is that everything is very clean and the edge is completely sealed with the rust proofing before you insert your fan ring and move forward. Some roofs, if you've had your van for a long time or if they've sat for a long time, you might have some crud on your roof that is really thick and won't come off with a rag. Go ahead and use a Scotch-Brite pad and clean it with the Scotch-Brite pad. Do note though, wherever you go beyond the 2 inches or 1.5 inch perimeter, it will leave scuffing. So you want to be pretty precise in where you scuff it, but definitely clean any residue that is on there, and sometimes again like it's caked on. Okay, so now take your fan ring and notice that you have the metal tabs. Those metal tabs go on either side of the vehicle, not front to back. So you'll want to set your fan ring in before you put any glue down or anything, and set it into place. And I like to take a clamp and just put a little bit of pressure on it. And you can put a block in there to keep it from going on the upper rim right here. But either way, it's just to hold it in place because we're going to go ahead and pilot our holes into each of these holes where the screws go through the roof. You don't necessarily need the piece of plastic trim ring that goes along the inside at this point, because the stainless steel screws will sink into those fairly easily, but they have a hard time penetrating the skin of the vehicle. So I just basically use a couple of clamps to hold it in place while I drill those holes, and that way all my holes line up when I put it back in. Okay, so once your holes are drilled, piloted in, remove the fan again, and just make sure you get all of the tailings out of the way. All right, so you can apply the adhesive directly onto the fan ring or onto the vehicle. Either way, whatever seems to work best for you. I usually put about a 1/4 inch of bead right over the top of the holes that I just put in there. And that way I know that that hole will be filled when the screw moves into it. Bead on the inside edge. Okay, so carefully drop your fan ring into position. This is it's an expandable caulk, but it's also very, very strong adhesive. You can, according to the company, literally clamp it into place and not actually have to screw it into place, but I like to take the precaution to screw it into place. What I'm noticing though is that it's not squeezing out of the edge, and I'd like to get a little bit of it to squeeze out of the edge. So I'm going to pull it, and you can see where it missed, and I'm going to apply a bead across the fan ring around the perimeter. Okay. So after noticing that there were spots missing when I put it down, I went ahead and laid a fairly liberal bead around the edge, but just double check that you do have good coverage. And now when I put it down, I want to see a little bit of that caulk spread to the outside edge, which I am. I don't want to see a huge bead come out, but I do want to see a little bit of it. In your little fan hardware kit, you'll have 2 different sizes of stainless steel screws. One of them is a short, stubby one. Put that one to the side. You will use the longer ones to mount the fan. Right now, Neil is holding in the fan ring, but you can also do this with the clamps to hold the fan into place. Hold the fan ring into place, which will allow you to move forward without having to have somebody else hold it for you. Okay, so after you've mounted everything in, I can check and see that there's a little bit of the adhesive that's squeezed out around the whole edge. Not a whole lot, but enough. And I can take a rag and gently ease that corner. All right, so after you've just eased that corner in, and again, it's not trying to clean it all off. Don't worry too much about it. If you are worried about it spreading out and making a not a very clean line, you can always tape, a 1/4 inch outside of the perimeter of this and then peel your tape afterwards. But really it's just a matter of making a nice swoop lip around it as you sort of ease the edge of the adhesive around the edge of the fan ring. So then you can mount your fan, and you open it up first manually, and you'll notice there are these little holes on the side of the fan. Those will line up with the clips. And what I like to do is I'll use my small drill bit. I slip it through the hole where that clip is and pull up on it, just so it's raised up. Sometimes the clips can be so far down that they're difficult to find the screw head when you're mounting the fan. So I just pull them up to the top of their hole. And then make sure that the tail of the fan is facing aft into the van. And make sure your wire finds its way inside as you gently slip the fan over the casing. This is where the stubbier screws come in, and you can place these into the side and I generally like to just get them started until all of them are in, and then I will cinch them down. So when you cinch them down, the width of the screw sort of pulls it into the center of that hole, and it sucks the fan down. And at that point, you can peel the plastic off the top, and what you should be left with are these 4 screws that have little white paint on the top. Keep those in the same compartment up front where you put all of your other finished screws for your visors and your B-pillars, because these hold in the fan shroud that goes in after you put in your paneling, and it's sort of the last thing that you're doing to the van. So I always put them in the same compartment where I have all those finished screws. You also will have electrical outlet ends or terminals, electrical terminals. These terminals we do not use, so you can go ahead and put them in a spot for some other project. So this adhesive sets up in a few hours, but you'll want to let it set overnight or 24 hours at the minimum before it's fully cured. It may even have a breadth of a bigger gap. It takes a little bit longer to cure. But for this situation, just at least let it sit for a couple of hours. Not that you're going to do anything to tweak on it, but that's just the drying times that they give you. And if you're in a rainy situation, this does need to be applied in a dry environment. All right.